My name is Professor Kent Seibert, and I'm the chair of the Economics and Business Department here at Gordon. I'd like to have us start in a word of prayer, so if you'd please bow your head with me. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for this special day in the history of Gordon, a day of new beginnings, and we ask your blessing upon this day and on Gordon's future. Father, you have used Gordon in the past to do your work, and we look forward to how you will continue to use her in the future. In this next hour, we'll be considering an important piece of your creation, the marketplace, and I ask that you would bless our conversation as we consider how we can be used of you to serve in that arena. Bless us with your presence, and we pray this in the precious name of your Son, Jesus. Amen.
Amen.
Well, our symposium is Faith in the Marketplace. When I see those two words together, I'm quickly transported back to around 1980, which is when my business career began. And around 1980, thinking about faith and the marketplace led to, in a sense, maybe more conflict than convergence, in a sense that these two things don't really go together. They don't really have much to do with each other. Or if they do, it's on a very personal level. You have your faith, and that's important to you, and that's fine, and you keep that private and to yourself. But it's not going to really come to play in your day-to-day work. Fortunately, I think we've seen in the last couple decades a dramatic change in those types of attitudes, both within the church and outside the church. That indeed there is a place for faith in the marketplace. That a career in business can be a calling, even a sacred calling, and an opportunity to serve the Lord. We are blessed this morning to have three distinguished panelists with us who have thought a lot about this issue, and maybe even more importantly, have lived this issue in their careers. And I think a couple of them, well, really all three of them, still living that challenge.
Still living or still?
I won't say which one I was thinking of. Still living that challenge in their lives. So what I would like to do is briefly introduce each of our panelists. I'll go through and introduce all three, starting with the farthest from me and coming to the closest, and then we'll go back and hear a brief introductory comments from each of the panelists, and then we'll get into some questions. To my far right and your left is Katherine Alsdorf. She is the executive director of the Center for Faith and Work at Redeemer Presbyterian Church in New York City. The Center for Faith and Work has three primary goals: to equip individuals to fully apply the gospel to their professional lives. Secondly, to connect professionals within a field in ways that further the gospel. And thirdly, to mobilize leaders to become agents of change for the common good within society. Prior to this role, Katherine worked for 20 years in high tech, both in New York and in California. She served as president and CEO of Pensair, an online management education startup. Before that, she was the president and CEO of One Touch Systems, a corporate communications hardware and software company. Katherine, thank you for being here this morning. Next to Katherine, and sitting in the middle of the panel, is Rich Malloch, president of Hearst Media. Rich joined Hearst in 1991 as the group head of Hearst's consumer book publishing and trade magazine group. In the late 1990s, Hearst sold the consumer book business to HarperCollins. Rich looked to reinvest the proceeds from the sale and build a fifth large operating group for the corporation. Traditionally, Hearst trade publishing was based on print products with significant revenue generated from advertising. Rich changed the strategy and business model, moving the group toward revenue generated from subscriptions and licensing fees. In consideration of this new strategy, the group was renamed Hearst Business Media. Today, the business is more than 85% based on digital products. In addition to his role as president of Hearst Business Media, Rich is a senior vice president of the Hearst Corporation and a member of the board of directors. Prior to joining Hearst, he served as principal in the New York office of Morgan Stanley, involved in corporate finance and mergers and acquisitions. And closest to me is Dr. Neil Warren. Dr. Warren is a Christian theologian, inspirational speaker, and chairman and co-founder of the online dating service eHarmony. He's the former dean and psychologist at Fuller Theological Seminary. Although he's no longer involved in the day-to-day management of eHarmony, he is chairman of the board and plays a vital role in the business, inspiring users with his strong belief in the power of healthy, long-term relationships. Dr. Warren's experience includes 35 years as a clinical psychologist, counseling thousands of clients on relationship issues. He's also written several books on love, marriage, and emotional health, including the best-selling Finding the Love of Your Life. Sounds like a good thing to do. Which has sold nearly 1 million copies and been translated into over 10 languages. Rich and Neil, thank you also for being with us this morning. So at this point, Katherine, if we could start with you, and if you would just share a little bit to get us started. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for the chance to be here. I met Michael maybe 10 years ago when he was doing interviews for his book, and we've stayed friends since then. And I can honestly say that his understanding of how to steward power, how to steward influence, has really been a contribution to my faith life and my work life. So it is an honor to be able to participate in this day in tribute to him and his contribution. So let me start out. I left college and became a teacher, and after the summer, after teaching 1 year, got a job at an economic consulting company. And we did work to justify the space shuttle program and all kinds of really exciting things. And I was drawn to the passion of those people I worked with. And I compared, I'm sorry to say, the passion of the teachers in the lunchroom in my school with this extraordinary passion of the scientists and the economists and the engineers and the researchers that I was working with. And so I switched. I was not a Christian at the time, but I thought, I want my life to be about this exciting exploration of new ideas. Over time, I grew in my understanding of how I could contribute to on the business side of this science and technology area, and sort of moved up the ranks from a business perspective. And then God interrupted things. And about at 40 years old in New York City, God sort of got me out by the ankle and wouldn't let me go. So after a lot of struggling, I committed myself and my life to God, knowing that my many years at that point investment in my business career could be right out the window. And wouldn't that be horrible? On lots of levels, I liked it, and secondly, I liked the perks. And I thought, okay, what might he call me to do, and am I ready to do anything? About a week later, my boss called me into his office, told me that he had a brain tumor and would I take over the company. And I thought, wow, our pastor says that you can be called to business, not just church or mission work, but I think God just hit me over the head with a 2x4. And so I had never sought that level of leadership in the company, but I ended up being president of that company, thinking, how do you do this as a Christian? What does this mean? God clearly wants me here. What do I do that's supposed to be different? And at that point, just the most modest behavior changes were going to be hard, like my language, just trying to not embarrass God was a primary goal. The second goal was just, could he give me the stamina to lead? I felt like he had thrust me out on this limb way beyond my competence. Would he be a source of supernatural help in this situation? And he was. But what else? Is there something distinctive that we should be doing as, especially when you're given this leadership position? What does he want of us? What does he expect of us? If the gospel is true, how should I be living and leading in some gospel-renewed way? Well, I wasn't really sure. We sold that company. I ended up moving to California, sort of had to start over and worked my way up the ranks, ended up CEO of a hardware software company. And over time, I got a little bit more insight. The more I learned about God, the more I learned about how he might want me to lead. And one of the primary thoughts was work could and should be fun. I know that sounds a little light, but once I studied Genesis and really understood we were made to work, God gave us jobs to do, I started to see that the fun I was seeing even before a Christian was built into us. That passion for doing something that's innovative and exciting was built into us. Creativity and innovation are fun. Making order out of chaos is fun. Working well as a team, maybe not working badly, but working well as a team is really fun. Seeing a customer love your product or be served by your product is really fun. Good work, I began to see, makes us more human. So how, as a leader, could I think about the work that each person was doing and enable them to have the most creativity, the most innovation, the most responsibility, so that their work was, in fact, as God wanted it to be? I can't say I did that perfectly. And actually, when I left that company, just a funny little story, they gathered and sang. There were about 150 people. They gathered and sang, "We've lost that lovin' feeling." And I thought, okay, God, I guess you're showing me something here. But anyway, I think my time's up. All right. The next company, I really saw how people were motivated by creating products that served the world. It was an internet company, did management education, and an overriding thought was, these 120 people show up for work on Monday morning so excited. They feel like they've got something they're working on, contributing to, that's going to change the world. And then I would go to our church. Same people in Silicon Valley, brilliant people, with a lot more to work with, the gospel. And they didn't seem to go out of church or into church with that same excitement. And my heart really started to tug for, what can we as Christians do to have our lives really be contagious in a passion for doing good work and serving the world, contributing to the shalom and flourishing of the world. So.
Okay, thank you, Katherine. Rich?
Good morning. I guess I'm the only panelist that's actually a graduate of Gordon College, so I thought maybe I'd start with a quick minute for the students here to talk a little bit about my experience at Gordon and maybe a little bit about what I found when I graduated. I graduated in 1975. I actually finished my coursework after the first quarter in 74. 3.5 years was the time I spent here at Gordon. I actually got here at a very, very early age. I turned 16 April of my senior year in high school. And so I was at Gordon College really at a really, really young age. And maybe the size of the college and the purpose of the college was really important to me as such a young person. I graduated from college in 74 with an economy that was maybe not quite as bad as this, but pretty darn terrible in terms of job creation. I didn't have a job when I graduated. I actually did service work at a children's home. I was a tutor. for about 7-8 months before I went on to graduate school. And I was fortunate enough, I had a Royal Dutch Shell scholarship to graduate school. And probably for me, in my early development, their support, they paid for my graduate work, they paid for a travel stipend, they gave me a summer job, they actually paid as I started towards a PhD, they paid for that as well. That was really the first input from a commercial entity that said, you know, you're talented, you're worthwhile, and we want to support you. That really was an incredibly strong message for me as a young person. But for any of you, as you're staring down maybe the end of your first, your senior year, if you're not sure what you want to do, you're not sure if there's a job out there for you, I can tell you from my own personal history, that's where I was, and that's the world I entered. Maybe jump forward. I've had an amazing career, a career that's taken on more and more responsibility. I've created tremendous amount of value for the family that I work for. Billions and billions of dollars of value we have been able to create. We've done some amazing things. And you know, as I look at it, from my perspective, God's enabled me to be involved in that largely because of what I think it means for me as a witness. So let me talk about the two words here, marketplace and faith. For me, the marketplace is where I spend my time. It's my life. And what I have found in working in it is that's where I connect to people. And what I will tell you is the people I connect with are totally turned off to the church. They're totally turned off to faith. And to the extent they have any reflections on it at all, it almost is universally negative. So it's honestly, it's my place. And it's a place where, with God's help, I've been really, really successful. So if you work in a place where people, frankly, are pretty much negatively predisposed to what you believe, how do you witness? And what I've learned over time and what I try to practice is, quite frankly, I don't say very much. I frankly think the Christian church at times says way too much. In fact, it says, it probably knows the reaction it's getting from many of the people in the world. And in a funny way, they almost validate what they say because it's negatively received. So what I've really learned for me, and it really is very personal, is that my life's about my interior. And so with the world that I live in that's 24/7, with the work requirement that is really 24/7, what's really important for me is that I spend time every morning and every evening in contemplation, in prayer, and in reading. There are several authors that are extraordinarily important to me. I've read for 6 years now John Stott's book that takes you through the Bible over the course of a year. So I try to read the Bible from start to finish each year. It's amazing how much that has helped me. I am a huge reader of Thomas Merton, probably the single most important author to me. I read him every day. I've read him every day for probably 20 years. If you stop and think about Thomas Merton, you say, how in the world does a monk who moved to live as a hermit actually inspire me? And it's really all about his interior life. It's all about his questions. It's also about the elegance in his writing. What I find is that if I'm convicted and challenged in my interior, in my soul, it somehow reflects in my life. I don't think I've reached the stage where I'm Stephen yet, about to be stoned, and people see Christ's face on mine. But that's honestly my objective. That's my goal. What I find is the people that see me in work, and now I have years of work and years of success, in times of their need will seek me out. And very often, I don't say very much to them. I might say, I'll pray for you. And that, in many times, really will surprise them. If I say anything to them, an encouragement, it's basically something that I probably have taken from Henry Nouwen, which is, you're beloved of God. I really don't try to judge people for their life, for their choices. My sense is, to the extent that's going to happen, God will convict them. Who the hell am I to do that? So for me, faith's really personal. Very, very personal. Thank you.
Thank you, Rich.
Well, I wish that faith could have been personal for me in the last 3 or 4 years. Some of you know that we've had a lot of opportunity to share our faith in various ways that haven't turned out so well. But if Michael Lindsay were here this morning, I don't think he is he? So I can talk more freely. I would say that I'm really impressed. Somebody was saying that they had predicted, actually it was George Gallup who is here. George isn't here either, is he? I mean, right now. George Gallup is one of the greatest persons I've ever met. He has had more to do with the Gallup organization than anybody else, and as you know, he's been a mentor to Michael's. But George said that he predicted that Michael would be the president of a major college before he was 40. But I had no idea. I mean, you know, Michael is one of the most persuasive persons I've ever met. But the fact that he was able to talk the Board of Trustees here into making him both president and king, I had no idea that he could get that title passed. And that they would agree in writing that they will never criticize any action or anything that he does while he is the president of Gordon College. That's an amazing thing that he was able to do. This panel, I think, is the panel Jesus would have come to this morning if he had been here in the flesh, because he was vitally interested in what we're trying to do here. I was taken just last week that in the Gospel according to John, they only make it to the 14th verse of the 2nd chapter before they've got Jesus with the rope around his hand, and he's driving those money changers out of that temple. He's got a lot of feelings about the marketplace, right? He doesn't want you making the temple the place you push your goods. And he just had so much feeling about that he didn't worry very much about the Apostle Paul when he said, make anger your ally. Jesus just turned that anger into a mighty force in the very minute that he saw that happening. If Michael were here today, I would say, you know, faith in the marketplace, the closer you get to the human heart, is really tough. I can tell you, at eHarmony, we've had so many brushes with the marketplace. It's been so hard. If you've read very much about us, you know that we've been pretty well beaten up by both sides. We feared for our lives for a little while when we had to make the move that we made. I want to tell you about that just as a case study. So the Attorney General of the state of New Jersey, Ian, said that we had to start a site that was an equal site to match gays with gays and lesbians with lesbians. Now, I know in an audience this large that there are a lot of different ideas about matching gays with gays and lesbians with lesbians, but I got to tell you, when the Attorney General of the state of New Jersey tells you you have to do this or you can't do business in their state any longer, and when you negotiate with the state for 3 years and you've spent millions of dollars, and you find the best, the finest conservative lawyer you can find in America, Ted Olson, who is the Solicitor General for 41, we call him, General George Herbert Walker Bush. And Ted Olson tells you you've got to acquiesce, and you negotiate the best you can to get a situation that allows you to stay in business. And Ted Olson says that New Jersey will be the first state that will shut you down, and then you'll be shut down in state after state after state, unless you do something to meet the need of that state. And when you do the best job you can with that, and then you get, I'm going to say thousands, but I really think it might have been in the hundreds of thousands of emails, such that you have to seek protection from your own people, literally, because you have, in their minds, acquiesced. Faith in the marketplace becomes a really frightening place. You know, you don't know, but I'm a passionate Christian. But I didn't become a Christian until I was 40. I say that even though Ian Torrance is here today, president of Princeton Theological Seminary, where I went to seminary. I really didn't have Jesus in my heart in the way that at 40 I came to be such a deep believer. So I was shattered by that whole situation. I take a very different position on the gay lesbian issue than many people do. I say we don't know enough yet. We need to study more. I'm very well aware of Revelation and all of that, but I say we need to understand the etiology of homosexuality and all of that. And I tried to take a stand with the press, but we were having 100,000 marriages a year at eHarmony, and we were subject to tremendous scrutiny on this subject. It was the toughest single social issue in America, you know that. And when they went after us, we ended up feeling like we made the wrong decisions, but we didn't know how we could have made the right decision. I could tell you in detail all about it, how we tried to come out of it. But faith in the marketplace can be excruciating. When I think about, 660 laws that Jesus was dealing with, but there were only 3 that he really got skewered on dietary laws, Sabbath laws, and circumcision. We got skewered on that one, and it really hurts you. We lost a lot of our Christian audience. We've had 43 million people on our site, largely because Christians really trusted us. And we'd done everything in the evangelical world that we knew to do. We'd been on 17 Focus on the Family programs in 1 year with James Dobson. He really helped us enormously. But you come to an issue where the state says you've got to do this. The marketplace says you have to do this, and you can either give up your business or you can try to work out some kind of a compromise. It's not easy. All I'm trying to say is it's not easy. You can be as quiet as you want to if you're selling insurance products or you're selling widgets or something, but when you come to something like marriage and the heart and the soul, people aren't going to let you be quiet for very long. They want to know exactly where you stand. So I guess that's the way I start my 5 minutes.
Okay. Thank you, Neil. And thank you all. I have a long list of questions for the panel, but I would rather hear questions from you all. Maybe since I am in this position, I'll exercise some of my authority and ask one of my questions to get us started. But after that, I hope that we can open it up to you and hear from as many people as possible in terms of things you might be interested in hearing more from our panelists. So let me begin with this question. You all have been and are clearly leaders in your fields. What are some of the ways that your faith has affected the way that you lead?
Maybe I'll take a stab at that. Yeah, this is actually a question Michael Lindsay asked me some time ago when he was doing research for his leadership book. And what I shared with him was my style of leadership, and in the organization I work, it's been very successful and very different. My style of leadership is actually what I call a service informed leadership. So I actually believe that for me, the use of power emanating from my responsibilities actually is a loss of power. So I end up informing my leadership by service and by trying to actually use my authority as little as I have to. In our industry, I have the benefit of having extraordinarily bright and creative people. To get their best work, and to get the style and the quality of their work, you really want them to take the initiative. You really don't want to be in a position where you've told them what to do. And so for me, my faith has informed a leadership style which I think is a service mentality. In media, where there's incredible numbers of moguls, I can tell you that a service style-led leadership is extremely different than what most people see. So that's kind of base of my thought on that question.
Yeah, I would echo that, in that as stewarding the gifts and the innovation and the creativity of the people that work for you, you really need to give up some of the power, you need to give up some of the decision-making. And Dennis Bakke, who wrote a great book called Joy at Work, really struck me in talking about that. He said, yes, most of the time when I was making a hard decision, I'd think that person could not make that decision as well as I can. But what do you think God thought when he was giving us the plants to name and the world to make something out of? He certainly knew we were going to do a really rotten job of it, but he gave us the privilege and the honor of being able to make the decisions and the responsibility. And that's what we're supposed to do as leaders. And that was a great parallel for me to remember that in the midst of the moment when I'm not wanting to share it. The second is wisdom. You know, the best trade-off for losing youth is you're supposed to get wise, but as you approach, the youth is gone and the wisdom's not there. It's a little scary. So in thinking about wisdom and how does it come, the only thing that's made me relax about it is that it only comes from time with God. So to refer to what you're speaking, that he's got the wisdom. And the more that we understand the world and how it works according to God's design, the more we're tuned into his wisdom. And so that's been another area of just sort of thinking, okay, this is a difficult decision. There's really not a right or wrong in the eyes of the world. I'm going to really have to seek God on this and just pray that he is at work enough in this environment, in this situation, to help me know how to call it. And I'm not saying I've always been tuned enough into that to be the wisest person, but it's helped me relax over that whole idea of how do you become wise. So.
I've been tremendously influenced by David Brooks, who's the writer, the twice-a-week writer for the New York Times, and a new book that he's published. Have any of you read it? It's called The Social Animal. It's truly a great book. I think it's the second or third best-selling book in America right now. He says and shows a lot of research that 95% of what goes on in your brain is unconscious. You're not really aware of what's going on. I have been aware of a lot of things that I've done in my life that I didn't know why I did them. And I think the Apostle Paul tries to play with that some. I would like to think that what you're saying about daily meditation and all is designed to deal with the 95% of the iceberg that is your brain. You're sending out thousands of messages. If somebody asked me the other day, this young woman who's just finished her second year at NYU, she said, "What messages am I sending out to you right now?" And I said, "Well, the size of your pupils. I've never seen pupils that big." She said, "Really? My pupils are big?" I mean, the size of your lips, the squint that you have on your forehead, the way you move your head. Most of those are things that you're doing that you're not aware of. So we send each other all kinds of messages. Sigmund Freud said the most important thing is to try to make the id bring that energy over to the ego, so that the ego has more of a sense of all of that energy. And I think that's what we need to do. So one of the things that I try to do with the people under me is to tell them how often I feel stumped and how often I just don't have the slightest idea of where to go next, but invite them to kind of think it through with me and to use our values the best we can to find the way. And they seem to enjoy that process. I do. And it doesn't put such a load on me to try to lead them someplace where maybe I'm not ready to lead them yet.
Thank you. Well, we have, I believe we have a microphone available in each of the aisles. So if you would like to ask a question, now's the time to do that. I would ask if you would please stand. It'd usually be just easier to hear you, even with a microphone, if you stand. If you could just briefly identify yourself, and then you may have a question to direct to a specific panelist or maybe to the panelist in general. But who would like to get us started? Up front.
Good morning. Wonderful panel. Jarvis Ward with the Mission America Coalition U.S. Lausanne Committee. If you had to counsel pastors on preparing their parishioners for living out their faith, their Christianity in this context, in the marketplace, what would be your counsel, particularly when so many of the parishioners live the vast majority of their lives in the marketplace? And in the marketplace, of course, the context is not just the leadership, the directors, the presidents, but the guy, the gal who's at the food counter, the one who's serving at the medical clinic, the marketplace. What would be your counsel in a word or in a sentence? Pastor, you really need to prepare your folks to live out their faith in this kind of a way in the marketplace. Thanks.
Well, I would encourage them to become authentic people. And to become authentic, they've got to learn how to make decisions that come right out of the center of them. I like to think that all of us have a control booth at the center of our heads. And we bring in massive amounts of information, but what it means to be a human being is that you take all the information from the inside and the outside, and from all the values you've been taught and so forth, and you make really strong decisions. You know what I know. A lot of the decisions are 51-49 decisions. They're really tough decisions, but you keep making them the best you can. And after a while, you become what I think of as a contented person, because you're the person God helps you be when you take everything about your situation into consideration. So I would encourage them to become as much themselves, as authentic as they can be. There is only one way, in my opinion, to be content, and that is to be authentic. And there's only one way to be authentic, and that is to get freed up. That's what the gospel does for us. It frees us up to know that we're always, like Martin Luther said, when they asked him if he took this position on nailing the thesis on the wall, where was he going to be then? And he said, then as now, in the hands of Almighty God. And I think that's what we all have to try to do, is to become the persons we truly are, with the understanding that the great arms of God are beneath us.
Maybe two thoughts that I would share. One is, this concept that God even takes care of the birds of the air. If you stop and watch a bird, he's working for his food or her food from sunup or before sunup to sundown. So I think even in that there's something that's noble about work, and there's something that's part of the created world that's about work. And the second message I would give you is, and it's probably in terms of things I do with churches now, relates to the unemployed. And there's a tremendous amount of unemployment in this country. And in many churches, there are groups that have formed to support and deal with the unemployed. And I think to those people, it's really this sense that the economy and the world is a reflection of the brokenness of the world and the uncertainty of the world. And that if they're unemployed and if they're part of a structurally unemployed situation, that God still loves them, and that we need to help them as a community. We need to counsel them. We need to get them training. We need to get them internships. We need to get them opportunities. But those are just two thoughts I would have for pastor.
And I work at a church now, so I speak to pastors a lot about this. So primarily I would say value everything going on outside the church as much as you value what's going on in the church, which is really hard to do as a leader. As a leader, you're responsible for your own internal organization being thriving. But if you can see your internal church as the base camp that God gave us to equip people and prepare them and nurture them to send them out into the world, and that the real mission of the church is to be going out into our neighborhoods and our places of work, I think that values it in a whole different way and would unleash a lot of, it would help break down the dualism people have between being one way when they go to church and different when they go out into the field. So.
Hello, my name is Brian Harpine, and I'm class of '79. I'm also Director of Global New Products for Church and Dwight, and I'd just like to try and balance the scales here, Neil, for today, and let you know that I have a young woman working for me, and she proudly proclaimed that she met her husband on eHarmony. They're very happily married.
That's great.
And they're going to adopt their first child. Wow. So if she were here today, she would look to give you a big hug.
Oh, that's truly wonderful. I have to tell you that when Marilyn is right back here. Put your hand up, Marilyn, so they can see her. Marilyn just hates for me to do that. I'll have to pay for that. When we started eHarmony, we were 65 years old. I was 65 years old. Marilyn's a much younger woman than I am. We had no idea that anything would ever really come of it. We wanted it to, but we had no idea. But Marilyn came in one day and told me that there was a couple down in Dallas that were getting married. And I remember saying to Marilyn, "What?" I said, "Let's go down and meet them." So we got on a plane and we flew down to Dallas and we basically said to them, "You're getting married?" Now we take it much more in stride, but it never ceases to thrill my soul that two people find each other. And we've had a lot of people in their 80s finding each other, and they find a match. And obviously, most of the people are more in their late 20s, their 30s. People before a certain age, I say this to you, I know you were very active here last year. Before a certain age, people don't want very much help. It's going to happen for them, they just know, and it's just going to come along. But after a certain age, especially if you failed somewhere along the way, you want some help. And when I hear a story like that, I just want you to return the hug to them.
My name is Elsha Zwart, and I work for the college in the development office. My question to you has to do with the distinction, if there is one, between work and not work. So I'm trying to think about balance. You referred to the 24/7, Richard, about your work, you know, and we all carry our BlackBerries in our pockets. So how do you manage that?
It's a good question. I don't do a very good job, and I don't pretend to. And I also believe that in almost anything that you really want to do at a very, very high level, there's times when you, in fact, are going to live your life out of balance. I have quite a bit of stamina. What I do try to reserve for is a couple of things. One is I have 3 children, and I feel strongly that I need to be available to them, and so I do make that a priority. I'm married for 24 years, and I love my wife, and we make time for each other. But the way my life works, and the businesses I'm responsible for are worldwide businesses. I can get call any day, anytime, anywhere. And the expectation is that I will deal with it. So
Marry well.
The thing I would say is when you really like doing what you're doing, work takes on a different element. And people say, "Describe to me your job," and I sometimes say I'm paid to worry. And, you know, quite honestly, when I wake up in the morning, it's clear I've been thinking about something practically the whole night, because I have some really keen insights or thoughts or intensity about something that I may not even have gone to bed thinking about. So, balance to me, I guess the one thing I will say to you that I struggle with, and probably could do a better job of, and that's Sunday. That's probably something. If you said how would you maybe morph your time a little better, I'd probably be a little bit more restful on Sunday than I end up being. Maybe this is another piece of information that might be useful for particularly some of the young people. I probably my normal work day is about 12 hours, and it's pretty much a 6-day-a-week responsibility. And it was more than that earlier when I was younger and work that I had to do. So this concept of 40-hour work week is just honestly in the workplace today, except probably for a paid laborer, it's not there. I don't know.
Yeah, I would say that I was not married until 14 months ago, so I viewed my singleness as a competitive advantage. And I could work more hours than someone else and therefore look better and win. And the first time I was really convicted about that was when I began to understand some of the gleaning laws in the Old Testament to not just be a law, but actually to be a guideline for how God made us, and also a sign of our trust in God. And so what worried me before is if I, set aside part for God, that I would lose in the competition, and that God purposely asked people to set aside part of their field for the poor, even though the guy down the street might be selling all his field and get ahead. Made me realize it was an exercise in trust. It wasn't just a law. It wasn't a law. It was an exercise in trusting God, and an exercise in recognizing God's sovereignty over it all. It wasn't just the hours I worked. So I'm still a workaholic, and I do think that a 40-hour week is, I wouldn't trust anyone who worked for me that said I want a 40-hour week. But I've been very convicted that there is far more to God's plan for us to have Sabbaths off, to have a rhythm in our life and in our week than I ever honored before. So I'm working in that direction.
I don't want to be critical on that one, especially because I have the highest regard for the Redeemer Presbyterian Church. I just think it's one of the great things that's happened in a long time. But I tell you something, I'm older than most of you. I will tell you, I'm really worried about our world. I think we're in bad shape with all the time that people are spending texting each other, oftentimes texting each other, and the other person is sitting next to them. They're not reading the size of the pupils at the time they're doing that. They're missing massive amounts of information from each other. We're becoming less intimate as a society. If you read John Cassiopo's book from the University of Chicago on loneliness, the number of confidants that people have now is becoming fewer and fewer. People are becoming more and more individualized. I can tell you there is no middle class. There is very soon we won't have a middle class because we have so many people working so hard on one part of our society, just working their heads off, and they're making more money than we talk about a depression. It's a depression for some people, but other people are making billions of dollars a second in our society. Are their marriages getting better? I don't see it. As a society, are we in better shape? When Leon Panetta got confirmed by the Senate the other day, 100-0, it was the first time we've agreed on anything like that, nationally. We got a society now where only 6% of the people are happy with how the Congress is doing. We've got a really messed up society. And a big part of the mess up is that we've gotten too eager to do something that we think will make us feel more godlike. We've tried to take God's place, I believe. We haven't waited on God. If 95% of what goes on in your brain is unconscious, God created all that. It's for you to find that out. You find it out, I think, through meditation and prayer and lots of time alone, not time that you're just working to get another star in your crown. So I get a little bit passionate because I'm really worried about our world, and I suspect you are too. I think it's never been in this bad a shape as long as I've lived.
And I will echo that from looking at a New York perspective. So when we look at things that need to be redeemed, in the world we live in and what roles we as leaders can play. I think that our use of technology, our amount of time spent at work, the lack of intimate relationships, there's a lot of very important things that all of us as contributors to the flourishing of the world need to take seriously. So I appreciate that.
Well, if I sounded critical of you, I want to make sure that you heard the first word.
No.
I think
I was confessing. I was confessing.
we beat up confessors, you know.
I think we have time for one more question. Do we have one?
I don't like to be the last question, but my name's Jesse Adams. I'm a recent graduate from Gordon, and thank you for your time and your insight. I guess I'm always curious, as I've just kind of started into my career and dove into the marketplace, if you could go back and, you know, as a Gordon graduate and as young people, what is one thing that you would maybe do differently, and maybe an area in your faith, and as that conflicts with the workplace, something that you would change as a young person going forward?
Yeah, I have the privilege to work with many, many young people now and try to help them do things I didn't do. And as I said earlier, I was not a Christian until I was 40. So the most important thing to me is that they get their faith, their life with God straight before they go out, because it's a lot harder when you're in the midst of the demands of working to sort through what you believe, develop the habits to, in fact, have time with God and have it be real. And so if we have a program, a one-year intensive fellows program that gives the theology of, basically the theology of work, but it's a theology of public life. And they do that between the ages of like 25 and 30. And my hope is that they will be so well formed in theology and their relationship with God that they will be able to be not waste the amount of time I wasted in going in circles because I really wasn't connected to the right source.
Maybe let me answer that two ways. One, I'll tell you something that I would encourage you to do, and then I'll also encourage you to do something I did do as opposed to something I didn't do. So what I'd encourage you to do, and quite frankly, it's part of what I said to start with, and what I didn't do so well to begin with, is really that dedicated devotion. I think as you leave a place like this and you're surrounded by, you know, chapel and many, many opportunities to worship, in the day-to-day world, you can easily miss that. So I would encourage you to practice that in a way that's meaningful to you, and something that took me a little while to get started to do. And then on the positive side, something I did that has been an extraordinarily important part of my success is attaching myself to people in the workforce that I really admired and really thought were really strong. I started out after graduate school in the U.S. government as a special assistant for an assistant secretary, and through that I connected to the secretary at the department, Jim Schlesinger, and Jim Schlesinger became an extraordinarily important mentor to me and a person that literally pushed me to Wall Street. And through my life, there are many people that have opened doors for me, that have counseled me, encouraged me. I can point to 4 or 5 people that have really made a huge difference to me. So to the extent I could encourage you to do something as a young person, is attach yourself to people you look up to and admire and you think you can learn from. Show an interest in them, work hard for them, and chances are they'll help you.
If I could ask the Lord for one thing, I would ask the Lord for another Billy Graham. I think that's what we need now. We need another Billy Graham. But maybe we have Tim Keller, and we have Rick Warren. I would encourage you, find out the cutting edge of technology today and figure out, like Rick Warren did. Rick Warren's book sold more books than any book of its kind in the history of publishing, right? Find out how to use technology for the spread of the gospel. Because don't forget what the gospel is. It's designed to free you up. And it's like Katherine says, it's the Old Testament is really about helping you find your way in the world. But if technology is going to intrude itself on us, and right now it's threatening to kill us, find a way to turn it to the other side. But you got to get to know the technology first. I'd get with that. I'd go out and ask Rick Warren or Tim Keller or somebody like that if I could be his full-time assistant for no pay. And then you figure out at night how you can make your way. I mean, learn from these people. They are absolute geniuses for how to turn the world around. I didn't do that. It took me, I told you, I was 65 years old before I had my first original thought.
Well, I would like to close us with an insight from Thomas Merton. And I can thank Rich for his earlier reference to Thomas Merton. He didn't tell me he was going to be mentioning Thomas Merton, but when he mentioned that, this came to mind. I think it's relevant to the conversation that we've had. And one of the many meaningful, insightful things Thomas Merton said was this. He said, "A tree gives glory to God by being a tree." Simple but profound. A tree gives glory to God by being a tree. I think the implication is that we give glory to God by being who God created us to be. And for many of us, He's created us to be people who feel drawn, feel gifted in the marketplace. And what a wonderful opportunity that is, I think, to live out one's calling, to be who you are, to be a person of faith and business, and to do that for the glory of God. Wonderful questions, wonderful comments from our panel. Let's thank them for their time.